I think it probably took about 3 or 4 years before a therapeutic culture was really established.
Mm.
It involved bringing people in. He had to sort of sift out through the staff that were there, those that were going to be positive about the change he wanted to make. It was also crucial for him to bring in Barbara Docker Drysdale as the consultant child psychotherapist.
Yep.
And she was already well established and well known in the UK through her work in starting and running with her husband the Mulberry Bush School,
Mm.
uh, which I'm pleased to say is still going very strongly
Yes.
and is doing great things. One of the very few places that, probably almost the only one that survived from the sort of 1940s and 50s and has continued and managed to adapt and change and still keep its primary task.
Incredible.
Um, yeah, it is. It's quite really very remarkable.
Mm.
But Barbara Docker Drysdale and Richard Balboni had worked together before, and so he knew that she was going to be very much on board with what he was wanting to do. And of course, her understanding through her own work as a child psychotherapist and her cooperation with Donald Winnicott um, meant that she was able to bring in the philosophy and the practice and the understanding of working with emotionally unintegrated children.
Mm.
Um, and these are children who have got very little uh, capacity to manage their own behavior, are very chaotic. Um, Inside, they're really very small children indeed, even though they might be 11, 12, 13 years of age.
Yeah.
And very, very difficult to look after in group care because
Mm.
they are very, very disruptive. Naturally, it's their need for attention often comes out in such negative ways, which is
Mm.
difficult for staff to cope with because it tends to bring about sort of quite a negative reaction rather than an understanding reaction as to where they're coming from.
Yes.
So building that culture took quite a time, and it did
Mm.
mean having to use the term. It sounds a bit kind of brutal, but weed out those staff that
Mm.
weren't really aligned with that.
Yeah.
Um, but that was done, and as I say, with the support of the managing organisations behind the Cotswold community.
Mm-hmm.
So the farm was quite important. I mean, in the approved school days, it was used very much to send boys out to work on the farm.
Yeah.
But really, that changed dramatically for the Cotswold community as a therapeutic community. It provided a very positive environment. I mean, when you're surrounded by the sort of chaos of children, to actually look out the window and see somebody doing an ordinary job, doing ordinary things like ploughing a field or bringing in some cattle, it's kind of brings you down back to earth, literally back to earth. Um,
Grounding. Yeah.
and and some of the boys also enjoyed helping out on the farm. They weren't made to do it. They wanted to go and help feed the cattle or be involved in the lambing season or helping to stack bales after harvest and things like that. I mean, it was something that was an additional part to the life, which made life interesting. And of course, most of the boys who came to the Cotswold community came from inner city areas, and so for
Mm.
them it was a big change. And initially, they possibly found being in the quietness of the countryside quite difficult, but
Yeah.
that didn't tend to last long because they made sure it wasn't very quiet for very long anyway. Um, and so the Cotswold community was a completely kind of integrated environment. The boys lived in 4 separate households, quite small groups by those times. I mean, in groups of up to 10. Nowadays, 10 is regarded as quite a large group. It's interesting then.
Yeah.
We were actually bringing groups down from the size of 20 during the approved school times to under 10. And um, the households that they lived in were quite self-sufficient. They had their own staff teams. They cooked their own food. They did everything together. They also, I mean, had their own garden and territory, which was theirs, which they looked after, and their space. Um, there was a school there as well, so the boys went to school within the
Mm.
Cotswold community. It was completely separate from the households. They walked to school. They had their own school groups. Um, The teachers who worked with them in the school also came and helped out in the households for some time in the week. And again, the crucial part of all that was really good communication between all parts of the organisation. And that's what a lot of the boys, their unintegrated personalities meant they needed a very integrated environment to hold them, contain them, to manage them. So if there was something went wrong in the school, it was vitally important that that information came back to the household straight away, and vice versa. So the people working together, it was trying to reduce the possibility of splitting between different parts of the organisation. And again, I see in the UK today, I mean, it's very easy for a child to have a problem in school and for the parents not to know for weeks, and vice versa as well. The school doesn't know that this child is coming into their school every day and is having to deal with huge problems at home. The Cotswold community had to avoid that, and it did so very well. There was a lot of time spent in discussions and meetings between all the different staff. And that's something that Richard Balbirnie knew was very vitally important and encouraged.